the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And our eyes are on our email accounts because I am waiting for, at 4:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the email from the Washington Commanders that says who did or didn't make the roster. And we don't have it yet, despite the fact that the deadline to make that decision came 4 minutes ago. We know a lot of cuts already from what has been reported, and I would say there is one that stands out as pretty shocking to me. Everything else, I would say, is expected. I know that there are some others that perhaps are shocking to other people. I would tell you that you should listen to this show, and you wouldn't be as shocked about it, like Martavis Bryant. But Anthony, the one that is shocking to me so far is KJ Henry. The fifth-round pick from 2023 has been waived by the Commanders, certainly a practice squad candidate, and he'll be on someone's team, whether it's practice squad here or practice squad or, frankly, even a waiver claim somewhere else. I thought he was one of their best guys in the preseason, maybe their single best guy in the preseason games when you combine the guys that actually played snaps with quality of those snaps. Obviously, that doesn't mean that he should have been the favorite number one, slated defensive end, just like Dorrance Armstrong didn't play a whole lot. So of the guys that actually played a lot of snaps, I thought he was the most consistent one. He consistently got pressure. He's in the backfield. He rushes hard. He plays hard. He chases things down. Like, that dude fits, even though he was drafted by the previous regime, fits everything that this regime wanted. And I thought that he had elevated himself above the fray, above Jamin Davis, above Javonte Jean-Baptiste, above Andre Jones Jr. Jones Jr. cut as well. It looks like Davis and Jean-Baptiste are on as we speak now. We're waiting again for that email any moment now that announces the full list of cuts. But I think what's interesting is we are now down to two players, Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin, from last year's draft class. And it is pretty clear that Adam Peters is building a long-term project here, and the pieces that he feels like he needs for this long-term project were not the same things that Ron Rivera and his staff were looking for. And last year, man, what an absolute failure. And we don't need to go back and rehash and relitigate it, but I think that the problem or the perspective that is worth stating out loud, Anthony, is it is really, really hard to build something if you completely miss a year in the NFL. And we are Emmanuel Forbes not turning it around from Quan Martin being perhaps the only guy in a single draft class to stick with a team for 2 years. Like, we're in 1 year right now. 1 year. The start of year 2. And we're down to 2 guys. And depending on how Forbes goes this year, and his camp certainly warranted him being on the team. He got better as it went, but we know that it's a mixed bag, and we know he's not going to be perfect this year. Maybe he turns out to ultimately be that stud that he was drafted to be as a first-rounder, but I think that most of us would bet against that. And Quan, like, for as much as I like Quan, it's not like he's going to be an all-pro this year. And so to just completely whiff on a draft class, like, is so hard to build that way. And it sets you back, and in some ways, it should, in our eyes from the outside, buy Adam Peters almost an extra year, because there is coming in with the cupboard being, bare, what we traditionally think of as a covered bare in the NFL, and then we literally have no one entering their second season outside of 2 DBs that can help us, to the point that not just they won't play for us, that they can even stay on the team. That is brutal. That is a brutal, brutal reality that Adam Peters inherited. And I don't think he came in thinking that. Not that he wouldn't have taken the job or anything. To be clear, I don't think that Adam Peters took the job in January and was like, I cannot wait to clear these dudes out. I think he was like, I am going to get in here. I know what I think of a lot of these guys, but I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised. I'm hoping they take to our coaching. I'm hoping that when I get to watch them work, that we see something that maybe we didn't see on tape or is different or whatever. And it wasn't there. And now every single one of them, but the 2 first-round picks are gone. The only other guy that's around from the 2023 draft, this just in, John Keim reporting that John Ridgway has made the roster. I know that there are some trades that are being worked on for him potentially. I heard rumors of one specifically, but I haven't been able to confirm it yet. So we'll see if he is here by next week. But shoot, Dan Quinn was a part of the group in Dallas that helped draft John Ridgway, and then they cut him last year. We're on pace, potentially, for Dan Quinn to be a part of half the number of draft picks from the 2023 draft that Ron Rivera was for the team that Rivera coached at the time when Quinn was the defensive coordinator at a division rival. That's the reality, Anthony. That's where we are.
Yeah, it's not a great place to be. And
Hashtag analysis.
not a great place to be, but also I just don't think we can, overlook or overstate, Adam Peters' initial thoughts on what the roster was. But it also it makes me laugh at, what Ron Rivera thought of, the team and how he thought, more than half of the team was still going to be here and we should send him a ring if, the people he drafted and brought in were going to be foundational pieces for our success. I just can't, get that, that quote, that statement out of my mind.
I laugh at it every single time one of his dudes gets cut. And I hate that because, it's really not about Ron. It's not about that. It's about the players, and it's a really tough day across the NFL. You got guys like Bryson Tremaine played really, really hard all camp long and did a lot of really good stuff, and he got cut today. You had a lot of dudes that really, really gave it their all. I mean, Chris Rodriguez, I feel terrible for Chris Rodriguez. He's a good back. He belongs in the NFL, but he doesn't fit what they want here. And he's going to have to either be on practice squad and hope that he gets another opportunity or go find a job somewhere else. And, he'll wind up in the league. He'll be on someone's practice squad. He's a 5th-round pick last year, and he showed well as a rookie. But, we say that, he'll wind up somewhere. Moving sucks.
Yep.
You get drafted somewhere, you think you're going to be there at least 3-4 years. Now, Chris Rodriguez, 1 year out of college, he's probably 23 years old or something like that. Think about what life was like at 23. You pack up, leave. He gets to play NFL football, but now he's got to go try to latch on somewhere where he hasn't been around the entire offseason. Or, if he gets lucky, he'll be on the practice squad here, and at least he doesn't have to uproot his life. But, this is real life for folks. But for Ron's part of it and that comment, it just is, it's one of the most arrogant things anyone has ever said. And to me, arrogance crosses into confidence that's unfounded, right? It's what's the difference between confidence and arrogance? Confidence is correct. Arrogance is incorrect. Arrogance is I'm the best, and you go out and you compete and you get your ass kicked all the time. And for Rivera to think that Sam Howell and 40 guys that he drafted were going to go be the next Commanders dynasty, and he was just going to be unlucky to not be at the head of it. Buddy, no on all fronts. You ain't that good of a coach. You weren't that good of. You were obviously a horrendous general manager, and just a legacy of mediocrity would be overstating it. And it always bothered me, the arrogance that administration and that organization, or that the people here at that time operated with. And now it's not a problem anymore. And the more purging of that happens, the less that we have to keep going back to it and talk about it. But on a day where they cut almost an entire draft class from last year, it's worth pointing out, in the credit of Adam Peters, to just be yeah, that ain't it. We're gonna move on. And again, it speaks to the depth of the hole they are trying to dig out of. It's a good reminder in some ways going into this season that this could possibly be a hard year, even though the excitement's there. There's going to be a lot of really positive things. I don't know that it's going to lead to it doesn't mean it's going to lead to a 10-win season, because the talent gap they were trying to fill was so immense. But if they got this year's draft class right, then they can kind of undo some of that from last year. But that's the journey we embark on starting next weekend in Tampa. All right, when we get back, hopefully we'll actually have the full 53. We'll also run down some of the rest of the cuts. Dan Quinn also slated to speak at 4:30. We will carry that for you live here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are waiting the official roster. My guess is Commanders PR will send it right before Dan Quinn gets to the podium, which is scheduled to be for 4:30. So we are keeping our eye out for DQ. When that beautiful bald head gets to the podium, we will let you hear it here on the Team 980. Also, tomorrow, Adam Peters' press conference. That'll be the end of Russell's show, possibly bleeding into the start of ours. We'll have full reaction from Adam Peters tomorrow. Lance Newmark speaks on Thursday, the assistant GM. So also programming schedule tomorrow. We will record Take Command in the afternoon after the practice squads are released. So things are fluid right now. But here's what we know in terms of where things stand. The latest updates as we await more cuts. The Commanders are releasing Trace McSorley. Multiple reports, including our pal Mitch Tischler, reporting that. Mitch is going to join us coming up at 5 o'clock, and we have an announcement with Mitch as well. But, so McSorley out, but impressed a lot of people with how he handled himself and how he performed through this this process the last couple of weeks. And so there's a really great chance that Trace McSorley is on the practice squad. The other big one that came through recently is John Ridgway, as we told you at the end of the last segment. He's going to be on the team for now, although to read directly from Keim, key will be, is he on there at this time Wednesday? Washington will continue to be active looking for players. They know there's a market for Ridgway. So that is where we are now. Some other former Commanders that are worth noting around the league. Taylor Heineke has made it in Atlanta. He had apparently said a couple weeks ago he saw the, quote, writing on the wall, but he sticks on the Falcons' initial 53-man roster. Some other names that I kind of chuckled at as we were talking about the Rivera lackluster everything. Nick Gates, who they signed, of course, last year and was a starter for them, got cut today by the Eagles. Nick Gates, who has now played for 3 of the 4 teams in the NFC East, jolly big fella. Also, John Ross was in camp with them, the former holder of the record of the 40 time at the Combine. He got cut by the Eagles today. Oren Burks, veteran linebacker. Will Greer. So a couple of guys there of note. Jalen Guyton, wide receiver, cut by the Raiders. Basically any wide receiver that I've heard of that gets cut, I'm like, ooh, I wonder. Patrick out of Denver, Tim Patrick is definitely one to watch for the Commanders potentially. Vikings have waived former first-round pick from 2020, Louis Cine, the safety. They had talks with other teams but weren't able to land on an agreement. Then the other big Commander story, actually, that just dropped 2 minutes ago. I think Keim was first on this, but Nikki and Stanek and everybody reporting it as well. The Commanders are going to replace, and we called this yesterday, Anthony. This is on our 53-player roster projection, Jordan McGee to IR. So the linebacker will miss the first 4 games of the regular season, the rookie. I really wonder what that means for the linebacker depth. Do they keep Anthony Pittman to start? Do they go find someone somewhere else? Or do they just do what we did yesterday and keep 4 to start? And that opens up spots. But with guys like KJ Henry not making the team, that definitely makes the math a little bit different. 301-230-0980 is our phone number. Let's get a call real quick let's get a call in real quick before we take an early break here and then come back in time to ensure that we get all of Dan Quinn. Let's go to Mark in Largo. Mark, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, Craig? How you doing, my friend? What's going on?
What's
Look,
up, Mark?
I was just telling the caller, man, that I think the move I would do if I was Washington before anything would be I would make a trade for Devontae Adams. And here's the reason why I would do that. I think it would be cheaper for them to get him than it would be to get Brandon Ayuk. Plus, Devontae's probably played in the preseason, so him changing teams wouldn't be that much of a big difference. Here's the other thing, too. I'm not knocking Brandon Ayuk. But you need someone on this team who can get 50-50 balls. You have a tall quarterback, and I think Devontae's like, 6'2", 6'3"? He would be someone that can get 50-50 balls if he lobs it up there. I'm not saying Terry can't, but it would make the receiving core – it would give a spark to the receiving core where you would slide Diami at that third spot where he's playing in, which is where Jahan Dotson's playing, that other spot, which he's coming out, it won't be so much pressure on him. It'll be more pressure on those two, and Diami can get more open looks going, stretch out, and stuff like that. I just think it would be better. Do you see a trade like that happening for the team, or T. Higgins? Or T. Higgins for that matter.
Yeah, T. Higgins definitely not, because he wants a fresh new contract that's going to be like he's younger, stupid money. I'm guessing Devontae probably wants a lot of money, but maybe it's a little bit shorter term. And he's going to be a cap hit. This is why I think the Raiders are probably trying to move on.
he's going to be a $44 million cap hit in March next year. So I'm thinking the Raiders are really trying to move him now.
Well, they're still going to have to eat a lot of dead money the way the bonuses work and all that kind of stuff. Here's what I would say about Davante. You're never going to tell me that trading for Davante Adams is a terrible idea because he might be the best receiver in football still. Like he's I mean, I guess I would say Justin Jefferson.
Yes.
Jefferson's probably got something to say about that. JJ's the best guy in football, but Davante still might be second. He's up there with Jamar Chase and CD for sure. So I hear you on that. My thing with all of these guys, though, and the kind of general vision in terms of long-term versus short-termism and all this, Mark, is if you don't let the De'Ami Browns of the world play, and this is also my argument at corner why you don't bring in Stephon Gilmore, for instance. If you don't let these guys play, you don't know what you have. And so are they a better football team this year if Stephon Gilmore was signed and Davante Adams or Brandon Ayuk or T. any of these dudes are traded for? 100%. Does it help you understand how good of a football team you can be 3 years from now? And if the answer is no, I'm not interested. Because realistically, they've never, or in the NFL, history of the NFL, no team has ever won a Super Bowl with a rookie quarterback. And I love Jaden Daniels, but I don't think that's going to happen this year.
Okay, and that's fine, Craig. I feel you. I hear you on that. But look at what they're doing in Chicago, man. I mean, look, Caleb has an all-star receiving core around him. And if he doesn't do well this year, then that could be something on him. But you got to make it easy. Here's my biggest fear. I hear what you're saying, but this is what I don't want Jaden to have to feel like he has to do. Because he has a diminished receiving core, you start acting like Robert used to act. You have to do everything because you don't have the talent around you. You also got to get talent around your quarterback too, Craig. You just can't sit up and say, oh, well, we're just going to do this and see what happens and make everything happen.
Mark, I hear you, and Mark, I got to cut you off because, one, the roster just came in, and two, DQ's about to go to the podium here in a few seconds, so we got to break a little bit early. But I appreciate the call, and, if you want to call back in later this week and we can have this discussion, this is a good one. I appreciate the call. I'll just quickly wrap up and say this. I trust the infrastructure around Jaden Daniels to not make him feel like that. And one of the quotes that really stuck out to me from Dan Quinn when he named him the starter was, we told him he doesn't have to be the leader of this team. We got Bobby Wagner. We got Zach Ertz. Like, this isn't Robert 2.0 where Dan Snyder was like, look at our star. Like, that's not what they did here. Jaden Daniels' job is to play quarterback, and that's it. And part of playing quarterback for this team this year is going to be doing a lot of turning around and handing the football off. Because they know they've got to insulate him. They know their offensive line isn't good. This isn't Ron Rivera, who thinks he has a Super Bowl contender with a 4-win roster. This is a realistic group. And I think that goes a long way. And yes, Chicago's doing it very differently. And I'm pretty fascinated by the Chicago versus Washington experiment. But I think it's also important to remember that both can work. There is no right way to do this. There are wrong ways to do it, but there is no one singular right way. And I actually think that the approaches that both Washington and Chicago were taking might be right for their guys with their rosters at this point in their trajectories with what else they had entering their respective projects with the first and second picks in this draft. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And when we get back, Dan Quinn live from Ashburn. It's Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Any moment now, Dan Quinn will be live at the podium. We will take you there, obviously. The Commanders 53 is out, and coming up in about an hour, Anthony and I will look back at the 53 that we predicted yesterday, and we got like high 40s right. We actually, I think we're pretty freaking accurate on a lot of the things that we did. And the couple that we missed, Ant, actually were some that we kind of said, like, I might do this a little differently and we should have more trust in ourselves. For instance, at the tight end position, Cole Turner got cut. Colson Yankoff made it. That was one that I was just leaning harder into yesterday, and I don't think we actually put it down. And I wish that we did, because then I could brag today about being right on Colson Yankoff.
Yeah, he's one, but also the fact that they kept a third quarterback.
They did, which was you were on that. I should have,
I like Jeff. Dang, I can't even say his name.
He likes Jeff Driscoll.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean Driscoll. It's funny because I got a lot of like YouTube comments today that were like, "I'll keep McSorley over Driscoll," and I was like, "What? Why do you insist on being wrong so loudly on the internet?" Trace McSorley did a really, really, really nice job against fourth stringers. Jeff Driscoll, did an all right job against the Patriots first string. Different bit. Different level of test. And Driscoll was just really solid. I think, because it's also funny, Anthony, you have some of the same people that were like, keep Driscoll over Mariota. And it's like, no. But I also realize, in fairness to everyone listening, that, you got a job you got to do. You're driving home right now, or whatever you're doing while you're listening. It's our job to go to practice and watch, and we're lucky in that way that we get to go. And I tell you from practice, Jeff Driscoll did a really nice job, and it's fairly obvious that he's ahead of Hartman and ahead of McSorley. But I think both those guys could wind up on the practice squad, so going to be interesting to see. The one that we did miss at the end, we were down to a couple of different guys for a last spot, and I think we leaned into Tariq Castro-Field.
Yeah.
At corner, he did not wind up making the roster, and which I thought might open a spot for Chigozie and Newsium. However, that's not the direction they went. They went a little thinner at corner, and Derek Forrest did make the team, which I'm really, really happy for Defoe. He's a great dude. We talked to him in the spring. And I think that he's a guy that can play multiple safety spots. And I think especially with Dominique Hampton being moved to linebacker, then it kind of opens up a potential spot for Defoe where it's pretty clear they trust him if, say Jeremy Chin goes down. Defoe's your most direct replacement. In terms of a guy who has experience, although Tyler Owens does, as we predicted, and everybody I think did by the end, Tyler Owens does make the roster as well. So it'd be curious to know what the depth chart is there, but we'll, hopefully it's also something that we don't necessarily have to find out, because those guys are, everyone ahead of them is healthy. Percy Butler, Quan Martin, Chin, Jeremy Reeves does make it as well, so they're pretty loaded up at safety. Wagner, Luvu, Fowler, Michael Walker at linebacker, along with Dominique Hampton. They list Dante Fowler for whatever reason. He's an edge, but they list him at linebacker. It's a thing that they've done all spring and summer. Cleveland Ferrell, Dorrance Armstrong, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and Jamin Davis. They kept JJB and Jamin. Thought that would happen. For right now, they've kept the two defensive tackles as well, Mathis and Ridgeway, along with Newton, Allen, and Payne. Along the offensive line, the one guy that we, I guess, missed on by the end was Trent Scott. Thought he might wind up on IR, but apparently whatever he's got is okay, to the point that he does make the roster. So we got the number right, I believe, Anthony, but not the we got the number right, but not the guys. We were what is that, 8 of 9
on the line? So which lineman did we have in place of him?
We had
good people.
We had Julian Good-Jones who didn't make it, but is a definite practice squad candidate. We nailed the receiving core: McLaurin, Brown, McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, Crowder, and Pringle.
Pringle.
And then, I mean, that's a for now, though. That's a big time for now.
Yep.
Ertz, Bates, Sinnott, Yankoff. Running backs, Robinson, Eckler, McNichols. And then, as we mentioned, at quarterback, they got Daniels, Mariota, and Driscoll. So tomorrow, 1 o'clock, is the deadline for the waiver wire, which is also the deadline for the practice squad. A lot of good players, obviously, now spend the next 21 hours on the phones with their agents, talking about the opportunities that are ahead of them. I will say, Anthony, on the practice squad front, you're always better off staying where you spent the spring. Yeah, you might have an offer somewhere else, and it might feel really nice in the moment to be like, screw you guys, you cut me, I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to go join their practice squad. And they might even sell you on something good because their GM really liked you in the draft or whatever, or someone really likes you. But you know the playbook here. You've spent time here. You have relationships here. In a situation where can get called up 3 times to the active roster through the year, you could be 1 injury away from playing. And if you're going to play, don't you want to be somewhere where you've got experience, where you know the players around you, where you have that, and all you're going to do is practice mostly as a not a practice squad, but I mean obviously a practice squad, scout team guy in another place. So you're never going to practice your own playbook. I would rather stay where I'm at if I can. Some of the guys that have already been kind of rumored to come back include some of the running backs, which, by the way, not just Wiley and Rodriguez that are potential practice squad guys here, but Austin Jones, who was with Cliff last year at USC. He got released today and could be coming back on the practice squad. Some of the receivers, obviously, I'd have to think if they could bring like Cole Turner back. That feels like a no-brainer to kind of fill out their tight end room. Although there's a couple guys around the league that you potentially have an eye on. So that's the status. Anthony, we're still waiting for Dan Quinn somehow.
Yeah, I'm looking down at my phone. I got my watch on, so it's telling me to let me know anytime I get a notification. So I'm just constantly, every notification. Yeah, I definitely thought, he'd be out by now.
What's the point of having a schedule if, you don't follow it?
Yeah, I'm constantly.
Apparently he's talking. So.
Oh, are you serious?
I do not. I'm seeing quotes, Anthony.
He's not on Twitter. I guess they're on live streaming it.
Are they on? Oh, there might be a Zoom link of some kind. Tell you what. Let's.
Wow.
Well, let's just keep talking amongst ourselves, and we'll see if we can get the recording of DQ / seeing if we can find the live link for that. But other names around the league / other things to note. Kaz Allen did not make the team. Called that one. Everyone was on the Kaz Allen train late. I understand why, but I was just like, eventually he's got to make a play. He didn't. Broncos released 3 receivers that I think are all interesting for Washington potentially. Two more specifically. Tim Patrick, big guy, had a really productive year a couple years ago, but then tore his Achilles, then tore his ACL. So like nasty injury history, but he had a really nice camp and was kind of a surprise cut out there in Denver. They also released Lil Jordan Humphrey, who's made some plays in the league, and David Sills. Sills, if I'm thinking of the right guy, like he's a big dude. Am I thinking of the right guy? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you are. Big dude, fast dude.
I don't know about fast, but David Sills, receiver.
He's tall.
No, I don't.
6'3".
Yeah, he's a bigger target. Played it at West Virginia. Yeah, I am thinking of the right guy. Wilmington, Delaware kid. But yeah, man, started as a college quarterback, moved to wide receiver, and he's very tall. So all these big, tall receivers around the league that get released, definitely keep an eye on that. It's just a explainer because I'm a former beat reporter and I know these types of things. The Commanders are second on the waiver wire. So they will have the opportunity to claim a player, basically any player that they want, that Carolina doesn't want, is the one team ahead of them on the waiver wire. However, once they have that claim go through and they use up their spot, then they go down to the bottom. So it's not like they're second on every single player. They will prioritize their waiver claims, and the NFL then processes all that by 1 o'clock tomorrow. Anybody that goes unclaimed is eligible to be on the practice squad, and we'll see how that comes together over the next 20-something hours. But then again, you could also have a trade. You could also have other stuff that happens. So hold on to your butts, everybody. We'll see if we can get the Dan Quinn audio for you. If we don't get it live up and going here, then we will do something. We'll see if we can hunt that audio down by 6 o'clock and play some of it for you then. Mitch Tischler coming up at 5. But we'll definitely get you some of the quotes from Quinn and discuss what he's saying out from Ashburn next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Cutdown Day continues here on the Hoffman Show. Anthony, you made the roster. Hey! He was never in doubt. Never in doubt. Who would get? Actually, that's a road we don't want to go down. Joke cuts from the Team 980. I feel like feelings could get hurt.
Yeah, that would be bad. That would be bad, Mr. Hoffman.
That's why we're cutting Ryan Clary from 106.7 The Fan. I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Ryan. He's down there. He doesn't know that happened. But one of you will be a snitch and tweet it to him. And I say, be my guest, because it was a funny joke. All right. Ongoing coverage from Ashburn. We'll get Mitch Tischler live here coming up at 5 o'clock after Dan Quinn gets done speaking. This stat from Steve Wino, just to kind of drive home one of the big points of the day. Washington drafted 33 players during Ron Rivera's time in charge. There are 12 left, Anthony. 12.
12 is insane. Can you name all 12?
Ooh, that's a great challenge. Jamin Davis, Emmanuel Forbes, Quan Martin, Sam Cosmi, because it's not pre, or Wino's messed up, but I don't think we're talking about like pre-Rivera guys. Goodness gracious. Terry was before Diami. Any of the tight ends? No. Did any of the back? Chris Paul? Was he drafted? Was he a UDFA? I think he was drafted. So Chris Paul made it. That's 6. So I've got half of them.
Yep.
Let's see. Big Phil made it. Ridgeway doesn't count because he wasn't drafted by Rivera. I gave you BSJ. I gave you Forbes already. I don't think any of the corners. Defoe.
I was about to say.
I gave you Quan already.
No, that's 9.
That's 9.
Yeah.
Any of the linebackers? No, because I gave you Jamin already. Do you know who the other 3 are that are missing? Because are you looking at it?
Brian Robinson.
Oh, B-Rob. Yeah, I was about to say I miss running back.
That's 10.
And
then you got
John Bates at tight end.
Oh, yep.
And then
11.
I feel like I'm missing one of the linemen. Okay, now I'm gonna have to look at the roster because now we're getting into bad radio territory. Nope. Oh,
Jamin Davis.
I said Jamin.
Oh, you did?
I said Jamin off the top.
Oh, you did say those 3.
Dieter, Biotis, Allegretti, Wiley. Nope, it's not one of them. John and Duran predate him. Mathis, Farrell, no. Fowler and Walker, nope. Forbes, nope. Already said him. Percy Butler. That's who I was missing.
Oh, Percy.
So good job, Wino. Wino's correct. There's 12. Worth pointing out. That was a good little test.
Yeah.
Just, as we look around the rest of the league, specifically at positions where the Commanders could use help. If there's one team that you wanted to know who some of their veteran cuts were, Anthony, who would it be?
Veteran cuts?
Yeah. Guys drafted perhaps by Adam Peters. The San Francisco 49ers.
I was about to say the 49ers.
They let go of a couple offensive linemen, Ben Barch and Chris Hubbard. Not really sure about them. Robbie Chosen, a.k.a. formerly Robbie Anderson.
Oh, did he make the team?
T.Y. McGill, defensive lineman. They let go one of their tight ends. Trent Taylor at wide receiver. Our old pal Logan Thomas let go. Tracy Walker III, Nick Williams, and then Rock Ya-Sin let go at corner. So
yep.
If anybody from that list floats your boat, perhaps Adam Peters could be looking around there.
What do you most think, or what position do you most think we would be able to get out of the waiver wire? Or what position do you think they were? I would say linemen, but I don't think good linemen are going to be floating in, the waiver wire kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, like, positionally, it does feel like potentially an interior swing guy. If you can get a veteran, because I don't think Dieter had a very good summer.
Yeah.
But you keep him around because he's played and he's not going to freeze up in a big game. Like, he's capable. And I think the other thing, too, is Collinsworth talked about this the other night on the broadcast. You have Biotish as a veteran center specifically in part because you don't want a young guy with a young quarterback. You want part of that battery to be veteran. And so if, God forbid, something happens to Biotish, Dieter, at the very least, is a veteran who's seen some stuff. So if there's another veteran center that becomes available that you think is an upgrade on Dieter, do you make that switch? And I would say the answer should be yes, based off of how they operate in the name of everything is competition. I think receiver is definitely interesting because you have one bullet to fire. You have one guy that you can get on the waiver wire as that second claim order before you have to then wait in line behind everyone else to claim someone or hope that nobody else claims a certain player. So if I'm going to prioritize my waiver claims, I definitely think that wide receiver is possible if there's a big body type of guy because they wound up not keeping any of those.
Yeah.
And I would say Pringle's probably the last guy in. But I would say O-lineman, wide receiver, and if there's anybody you absolutely love at corner, I could see an argument to be made there. I think those are the positions that I'd probably be looking at.
Yeah, I definitely think receiver, just because we see guys like the Tim Patricks. We see Noah Brown, who, when CJ had everybody go down, he was the guy that stepped up, won them a game. Also, when he was in Dallas, he stepped up and won them a game, or a couple of games. You got John Mechie floating around as well. No, he made the team, actually.
But, he could be a situation like John Ridgway here where he makes the team, but they're still trying to trade him
kind of thing.
If a guy has value, and you feel pretty confident. If you got 2 or 3 trades on the table, you'd be like, hey, well, we don't need to have this arbitrary deadline. Like, one of y'all wants him. So who's going to give us what we want?
Yeah.
Dan Quinn, by the way, on keeping 3 quarterbacks. We like this quarterback room. It's such an important position that you want as many guys that are still developing and really pushing. I just think that Jaden Daniels has thrived with all these guys around, and so if they can keep all these guys around, why would they mess with it? Like, why mess with the chemistry of that room? The answer is you don't.
Yeah.
And so they didn't. And not to mention, as JP Finley points out, our colleague on Twitter, that with the preseason injury to Mariota, like, you got a rookie and then you got a guy who's been banged up. And even if Mariota is supposedly okay, what happens if you get into practice next week and he's not? Like, having Driscoll around is good insurance on that. Quinn also saying a little bit ago, says the players on the initial 53 know that there's still a lot of work left as waiver claims come in, and there are plenty of roster changes to come. It's not set, but we're starting our 53 with these. So talked about Jamin Davis, talked about a couple of other things. We'll get you more of what Quinn said a little bit later on in the show. Until then, we're going to get more thoughts on the roster on the initial 53 from our guy, Mitch Tischler. He joins us next from Ashburn here on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube if you'd like as well at the Team 980. We have been told that we can get some audio from Ashburn, so if you want to hear Dan Quinn, we'll get you some cuts later on in the show, 6 o'clock. Coming up at 5:30, we will go through the entirety of the roster to break down all of the positions, or position by position, what was decided today. Although, as we've told you all day long, what's decided today isn't necessarily what's going to be true by tomorrow. But it is 5 o'clock. We have our own announcement to make, and it's time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Today, it is our pleasure to welcome our pal, Mitch Tischler, co-host of the Beltway Football Podcast. Of course, co-hosted with JP Finley. Mitchell, how are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well, and I am very excited that because we only pick our regularly appearing guest by mnemonic literary devices, that we are going to do this all year long. People already know that we have Mondays with Michael Phillips, and now, Mitch, we're going to do Tischler Tuesdays.
Get the air horns ready. Let's go.
Yeah, Anthony, why don't we have air horns ready? What are we doing? Why do we not have air horns?
Not right now.
Not right now. No, Mitch, I'm so sorry. We don't have air horns. What we do have on my very silly board is we have you. Did you ever hear the story or remember the story of that F-35 that got lost last year?
Yeah.
And there was that viral interview with the guy who made the noise of what he thought the airplane sounded like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have that.
That was
So that's not an air horn, but that's kind of what we got.
You know what? That works for me.
Excellent.
What
And
about a
that's-
trumpet?
A trumpet, Anthony? No, we're not racing. He's coming on to talk football.
Yeah, but Anthony
My
knows
bad.
I'm a degenerate
That's why I
gambler.
What was that, Mitch?
Anthony knows I'm a degenerate gambler, so I'm good with it.
That's your. Hey, all right, we're off to the races. All right, Mitch is going to join us on Tuesdays all season long. We're really pumped about it. We're going to be able to talk about the game. I always love Tuesdays, Mitch, because you kind of get that chance to decompress on Monday. Maybe you get a little more context, start watching the film. But today, sir, we are reacting to the breaking news of the 53-man roster being named. Any, for you, major surprises, shocks, things that you're really happy that happened? Like, what's the biggest storyline or headline out of this initial 53 for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the two biggest surprises to me are Colton Yankoff making the roster. This coaching staff obviously wants these tight ends to be able to block and do a couple different things. He's a guy that kind of might be a Ben Sennett light type player where he can line up at tight end, but also can line up in the backfield and, be kind of that fullback, type chess piece. And then, some of those cuts were a little surprising. To me, I would have liked to have seen Ricky Stromberg on this roster. I think that, I don't know that you're really going to get a ton out of Trent Scott. I haven't been particularly impressed what I've seen out of him at tackle. I kind of thought Chris Paul would be your kind of, fourth tackle / guard piece, and then you could allow Stromberg to develop as a center, which last year he should have done, but wasn't given the opportunity to. I think he'll be a NFL player here. I'm a little disappointed he's not here.
Yeah, he's one that I was like, man, he was a third-round pick last year. If you can find a way to keep him, it feels like someone else would probably pick him up. And at this point, if you're him, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go somewhere else. But just never really the same after the injury. I also wonder, Mitch, like with that number 2 waiver claim, do you think O-line would be your number 1 target, or are you going corner, wide receiver, some other position for any number of reasons?
Yeah, I think them keeping 6 wide receivers kind of tells you that they're probably going to be looking in that direction. I think they're going to be looking at some of these veteran tackles that get released, which kind of we've been talking about since the beginning. I think there's a chance that while Colton Yankoff is a good story, he might be a short-term roster guy that then gets, dropped down to practice squad, and maybe they play that game with him a little bit. They might have been a little concerned. I think DB certainly is somewhere where you got to look at what comes on the open market. I mean, they only kept 5 corners. I think, maybe the same kind of thing could be talked about possibly with maybe Percy Butler or somebody, that safety group kind of making that, up and down change. Dominic Hampton making it at linebacker along with Michael Walker was a little surprising to me. I think part of that was because of the Jordan McGee move to IR. But all in all, I think that this 53 is interesting because it can tell you a lot about how the coaches are looking at things. But I think a lot of things are going to change in the next 24 to 36 hours.
Yeah, for sure. Mitch Tischler is with us, of course, Beltway Football. Check out the podcast, him and JP, wherever you get yours. I don't want to spend too much time just like going back and battering Rivera, although, God, it could be fun on a day like today. But if we look realistically at the fact that 2023 is all but a lost draft class, Lino counted it up. There's only 12 players here that he drafted in the 4 years. What kind of challenge does that present in terms of trying to build a winner moving forward? So, not trying to ask this just to be like, man, he sucked at this. Yep, we got it. Cool. He sucked at this. What does it actually mean for Adam Peters trying to dig out of that hole?
Yeah, I think it means exactly that. They're digging out of a hole. Across the board with Ron's draft, I don't think we have to go back and adjudicate it, but you can look at players who you thought they should have drafted. Christian Darrisaw, Christian Gonzalez up in New England last year. A bunch of guys that, have kind of been playing better than the player that the Commanders drafted. Listen, they're working out of a hole here, and I think you see it. You have a roster with, I think I counted it up, 34 of the 53 players are new from last year. So they're resetting the tone here, and I think as you talk about expectations for this season, all of that has to play into it. You have to recognize that it's not just a new front office, it's not just a new coaching staff. For the most part, it's a whole brand new roster, and I think some of the guys that they decided to keep were interesting and kind of point you in that direction. Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I think, is a player that kind of points to that. KJ Henry is probably a higher floor than that player, but also a lower ceiling, and he wouldn't have gotten a ton of run on this roster. So by keeping Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who may have a little bit of a higher ceiling, you're giving a guy time to develop, and you're kind of looking long term instead of just trying to win, right now. And I think the same can be said about the Martavis Bryant cut. Yeah,
for sure. What do you think this ultimately tells us about Adam Peters and the way that he wants to team build?
It's going to sound maybe harsh or weird for some Commanders fans to hear it, but this is how NFL rosters work. You don't get a roster spot just because you were drafted in a particular spot. You get a roster spot because you earned it and you played your way onto it. And, obviously when regimes change, what the coaches are looking for also changes. So that plays a part into the number of changes that we've seen here. But I also think it's them kind of putting their foot down. And it started with the Jahan Dotson trade. And I think you look at all these, draft picks from last year that were cut or moved on from, and it tells you that, they want to create this competition world. They want players who are going to play the game their way. And it's kind of one of those things, you're either with us or you're gone.
At quarterback, they keep 3. How much of that do you think has to do with kind of keeping the room the same for Jaden, Marcus's injury, Driscoll just largely playing well the last 6 months? What do you think goes into them deciding that it's worth it to keep a third guy?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a unpopular thought here in that I think Jeff Driscoll, though he didn't play particularly well in the preseason, so maybe that takes it back a step. But I think, obviously they want Jaden to start every game this season. And I think, to me, if for some reason Jaden gets hurt or whatever happens and they have to go with someone long-term, I think Driscoll's the better kind of multi-game starter option than Marcus Mariota is, because I think he can operate this offense a little bit better than Marcus Mariota can. I think, in a pinch, Mariota is great to step in game with an injury or whatever may happen to replace Jaden. But I think long-term, I like Driscoll a little bit better than Mariota to operate this thing. I think in this day and age, you got to keep 3 quarterbacks. You don't want to ever end up in a situation like obviously Sam Fran did. And quite frankly, if it's a player that you think is close to close to being on a roster, he's probably going to get picked up by somebody else if you cut him. So I like the, keeping the familiarity with Driscoll and, going that direction.
Counterpoint. My brain may have been pickled too long doing sports talk radio, but counterpoint, Mitchell.
Please.
If Jaden Daniels were to miss extended time, I want them to tank their asses off. I want them to be terrible. I want them to be higher in the draft because I don't realistically, this is a long-term project. And so if you're not going to be working on the most important part of the project, Jaden Daniels' development, I would like them to be as bad as possible, and I would like Sam Hartman to play if Jaden Daniels were to all of a sudden miss the last 6 weeks of the season. That's my counterpoint.
Let's be honest. If Jaden goes down, neither Marcus or Jeff Driscoll or Sam Hartman or Trace McSorley or QBX that you're going to pick up off the street is going to go in there and be a world beater and win you a ton of football games. So if Jaden goes down, the season, we know where the season is going anyway. And regardless of who's out there, they're not going to win a bunch of games. But Jeff Driscoll is going to complete more passes to your receivers. He's going to allow you to evaluate the rest of the roster. We've seen in other years bringing in backup QBs who don't allow you to evaluate a roster because they can't complete a pass. I don't know where Marcus Mariota sits in the pantheon of backup Commanders QBs, but I think Mariota would be difficult to continue the evaluation process if he ends up out there.
Fair point. And also, that is me. Anthony, is this wood? This table in here? It's covered in like a linoleum, but I think there's wood underneath.
Yeah.
Okay, that's me knocking on wood that nothing happens to Jaden Daniels. Just so we're clear.
Right. I mean, listen, the whole roster is interesting. The most important thing this year is what happens with number 5 back there, quarterback, and I don't think anyone's confused by that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Mitch, I'm very excited to do this all year long. Really appreciate you agreeing to do this, and in that spirit, we will talk to you next Tuesday.
Absolutely, and if I can make a request, Anthony, let's get an air horn ready to go next week.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Anthony, you on the air horn patrol over there?
Yes, I got you.
Okay, excellent. Mitchell, thank you for your knowledge, your insights, and your air horn requests.
I love it. I'm looking forward to it all year. Thanks,
excellent.
Bud.
See ya. That's Mitch Tischler, everybody. Tischler Tuesdays. They're coming. They're here. We just did it. Every week he's going to join us for Not My Beat, breaking down the tape and all that stuff here on the Team 980. 5:30, we're going to roll through position by position, see how we did on our roster projection, and also, more importantly, give you some analysis based off of each position group. But we'll continue to roll around some of the big cuts and big news items in the rest of the NFL next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Let's get you caught up with some of the big news items around the NFL before we dive back into the Commanders roster at 5:30. And Anthony, I will say we also need to discuss whether we do it today or tomorrow. We must discuss Keith Lee's trip to the DMV.
Oh, imperative, because I'm here to stand up for my city, man.
Yeah, I also would like to stand up for the food scene of the DMV because it has not been a good week on TikTok for said food scene, but we'll get to that later on, perhaps an hour from now. I might just scrap what we had at 6:30, and we might just have to get into it because I don't know if I can wait till tomorrow.
Okay.
Also, I'm going to be hungry, so I'll be irritable, which is some people's favorite version of me on the radio when they don't have to deal with me in person. Anyway, the point is there's a ton of stuff that happened around the NFL today because, well, it was cut day for everybody. 32 teams cut down to 53,000 different players now. Wait to see what their future is. Some do get clarity, though, not just the, hey, you're on the team type, because even then, for guys that are on the bubble, they could wind up off the team tomorrow and in the free agent pool. But a couple guys get, the pup treatment, etc. And Odell Beckham Jr. is probably the biggest name to have that go down. Odell Beckham Jr. signed in Miami in the offseason. He had an offseason procedure. They knew about all this. They were cool with it. They're taking a long-term vision on it. And so he's going to start the season on pup, Anthony, which is going to be pretty interesting. Tua Tagovailoa, I saw speaking today and said, like, he loves OBJ off the field. They have a great relationship and a great rapport, but they have zero on-field chemistry because he hasn't practiced yet. So how does he integrate in the middle of the season? Yet, it's exactly what he did with the Rams, and they won a Super Bowl. So I'm pretty intrigued to see what happens with OBJ this year. And when does he come back, and how effective is he at this stage in his career in that offense down in Miami with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle?
Yeah, the good thing, I guess, about the whole situation is, he's not the number one. He's more so wide receiver number 3. So it's not that much pressure. But, again, building that continuity with your quarterback is, extremely important. So I think, after the first 4 weeks, and that's typically when, the Dolphins offense is like rolling though. Like they begin the season fast all the time. So, he wants to get in before they start to get, into the wee or the late part of the season.
Yeah, and can he prevent them from declining later on in the season?
Yeah,
that's something Mike McDaniel's got to work out. Something, obviously, that we're watching here with Cliff Kingsbury as well has had some of those issues in the long term. Cleveland Browns made headlines today. They had a competition for the number 3 quarterback, Anthony, and then didn't pick a winner. They have 4 quarterbacks on their official 53-man roster. Tyler Huntley, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Jameis Winston, and then obviously Deshaun Watson. So Kevin Stefanski was like, we have 4 good quarterbacks, and he kept them all. And he hasn't committed to Winston for being number 2. So really any of these guys could be gone. And I think that's probably what they're looking at is like they don't want to cut, say, Thompson Robinson, and then they get a good trade offer for Jameis Winston to be a backup somewhere, and they're like, well, yeah, well, we're comfortable with Huntley and Thompson Robinson as the backups, so let's make sure that we don't cut anybody yet. So this is just like there's no way that by next Wednesday they have 4 quarterbacks on the roster, but they do for right now.
Yeah, again, you see a lot of teams out here holding on to players just to, be able to, trade them. So I think it makes sense. And if they feel as though, they can get some draft capital, because I don't think they have a lot.
No, because I think they're finally starting to get back to normal, but
yeah,
man.
But they had traded so much of it away. So yeah, I think that's more. It makes sense if I'm them.
For sure. All right. Some of the other big moves around the league. Allen Robinson cut from, as was Isaiah Hodgins, from the Giants. And Hodgins is a guy that had a pretty, if I'm remembering correctly, pretty decent day against the Commanders last year. I think I'm the right guy?
Yep.
Yeah. Allen Robinson was considered one of the better wide receivers in football, like top 10 receiver like 4 years ago. And just shows you sometimes it goes downhill and goes downhill quickly. The Giants also make some headlines because they keep Tommy DeVito, Anthony.
Oh, they kept DeVito?
Yeah.
That is pretty dope. Hodgins is surprising, though. Hodgins is very surprising just because of the season he had last year. Everybody hurt. I mean, I guess, somebody does have to, catch the ball and make plays. But it's just surprising, he was in the system last year with Brian Dable, one of the lead wide receivers on their team.
For sure. And, I mean, he had 100 yards and a touchdown in that playoff win over the Vikings 2 years ago. So, he's played in big-time games. He was the guy that Dable had in Buffalo. They brought him down. So, he's a Dable, Joe Shane guy. And just for whatever reason now, with Neighbors there, with some of the other firepower they have, he's no more room for him. He had 8 total touchdowns in his 2 seasons with the Giants, which is more than the 7 that Jahan Dotson had. And the entire world freaked out when not the entire world. Lots of Commanders fans freaked out. Yeah. Because, Jahan, 7 touchdowns. Yeah, it's a lot. But actually, no, I think Jahan had 7 in the 1 season. So, fair enough. He had 11, I believe, throughout the 2 years, 7 and a 4. But still, Hodgins had 8. He's a guy that I'm interested in. I don't know that you have to put a waiver claim in, but he's certainly a guy that I might be like, hey, want to come try to beat up on your former team? He's only 25 years old. Kind of interested.
Yeah.
Anybody else from around the league that caught your eye, Anthony?
It caught my eye. I saw some names earlier. Not off the top of my head right now.
Okay. Biggest move probably for the Eagles. James Bradbury was on the block. He wound up staying. So him and Darius Slay, both still on the roster, even though they drafted Kenyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So that's definitely a veteran name that could become available. James Bradbury. The Cowboys today trading Peyton Hendershot, their 4th tight end, or their backup tight end, to Kansas City. So that's that's there. A.J. Dillon placed on IR in Green Bay.
Yeah, I saw that. Season ending.
Yeah, season-ending IR. So that's tough. That's tough. Got the stinger. And that's after the offseason where, of course, they move on from Aaron Jones because they signed Josh Jacobs. And the thought was that he and A.J. Dillon would be good. But now they'll rely on Marshawn Lloyd, their rookie, along with Emmanuel Wilson. Packers also, by the way, traded last night for Malik Willis, the former Titans quarterback. Didn't really go great for him. Falcons kept Taylor Heineke rather than releasing or trading him. That was a bit of a surprise after, obviously, the Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix signings. Carolina releases former second-round pick Terrence Marshall Jr. He's another big body wide receiver to watch. The former second-round pick. Saints cut veteran safety Jonathan Abram, been battling for a starting spot, and he not only doesn't get the starting spot, but gets released from the Saints. Obviously, we talked about the 4 quarterbacks with the Browns. Any other big moves that we want to note as I scroll through here? That's pretty much it. They cut, the Raiders cut Nathan Peterman. There's a veteran backup quarterback that's becomes available. Also, you know who else got cut in Vegas? Dax Milne.
Ooh. Oh, do you know who else got cut today?
Jalen Guyton got cut by the Raiders. That's a vet receiver to watch.
Bobby McCain got cut also.
Man, if Ron Rivera thought you were good once, today was a bad day for you.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but it just is.
Got cut by the Vikes.
Yeah.
And then Samson Akua, he got cut by the Saints.
We should have
returned over the weekend.
I did. He should have finished that, and maybe he would have made the team.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's also a couple kickers cut today. We'll see what the Commanders do there. The Patriots had 2 in camp. Joey Sly, despite the fact that the former commander, best former commander that had a day today was Joey Sly.
He made the team?
He made the team, despite the fact that he missed 2 60-yarders at the newly named Northwest Field on Sunday. We'll talk about that story tomorrow.
Did the Titans kicker get released?
I don't know. Let's see if Tennessee's cuts are up on the cut tracker. They are not, so I don't know. But Cade York right now, he's got the job. Congratulations to Cade York. All right, let's go inside the Commanders roster next. How do we do on our projection, and why do we think that some of the maybe surprise cuts were made? We'll dive in next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, I need to go on a rant real quick before we get into the roster breakdown.
All right, hit me.
Here's the rant. I just was, I went to refill my water bottle on the break, and one of the local news stations was on. It was just Fox 5, and they did an Insta poll to see if Commanders fans liked the new name of the stadium. A whopping 86% said no, to which I said, duh, because Northwest Stadium is objectively not a very cool name. Framing it that way on the news is stupid, because who cares? Who cares what the name of the stadium is? Name of the franchise? Okay, I'll give you that. Yes, Commanders, not the Go Commander. It's a mouthful. We got it. It shortens to commies. There's not anything cool you can do with it. I get all that. Here's what happens when you go to a stadium. You hope it's nice. You hope it's a good place to watch a game. And part of the reason that it's going to be nice is because the owner got to make a bunch of money off selling the name to a gigantic corporation. This is capitalism. This is America. Is it perfect? Nope. But that's how it works here. So, yes, Northwest Field in the northwest of nothing doesn't make any sense. It's not north. It's not west. It's kind of West Maryland, I guess, relative to that part of the strip of the state next to D.C. It's not certainly Northwest D.C. It's not close to Northwest D.C. It's not close to the northwest part of the country. It's the name of a federal credit union. They wanted to spend a bunch of money to have their name on it. That's what happens. Hopefully, they continue to do a bunch of upgrades, and also Northwest Federal Credit Union probably gets to sponsor the new stadium. They have some kind of option for that. And if that's the case and it helps get a nicer new stadium, then sweet. It's less money that ultimately will come out of consumers' pockets, unless maybe you're paying heightened fees at Northwest Federal Credit Union because somehow in America everything goes back onto the customer. But yeah, like, of all the things to get worked up about, this ain't one of them. And guess what? Because like GEHA, I think, pays for Arrowhead out in Kansas City. You want to know what people call it? Arrowhead. This one will forever just be that place in Landover. Although I do kind of like JP Finley's abbreviation. Anthony, I say we call it the Fed.
The Fed.
It's better than anything else that it's been.
I like it.
Better than FedEx Field.
It's short. It's simple.
The Fed.
To the point.
Yeah. Northwest Federal Credit Union.
The
The
Fed.
Fed.
Okay.
Better than Northwest Stadium.
I think that tracks.
All right. Capiche?
Capiche.
That's my guy. It's one of those, if you know, you know. Okay, now that I've done my rant and said how silly news polls are, let's get to something far more serious. Something far, far, far more scientific. Roster projections. Anthony, let's see how we did on our roster projection. I actually think we did pretty darn well as the Commanders have named their initial 53. We pretty much knew we wouldn't get it 100% correct because we didn't know exactly injury statuses on a couple of guys, etc. But we actually did pretty darn well, all things considered. One area that we missed, we thought they would just keep two quarterbacks. We had Daniels and Mariota. If you're just tuning in, they've kept three. Jeff Driscoll also makes the roster for Washington. We'll see which position it was that we messed up later on and kept too many. Anthony, you might know off the top of your head, but I don't remember what it is. So running back, Robinson, Eckler, McNichols, got that right. Man, I'm so bummed that we're not perfect at tight end. Ertz, Sinnott, Bates, Colson Yankoff, he made it. We decided that Cole Turner was the guy that was going to make it. I kind of really wanted to go Yankoff. I wish I'd fought harder for it. And I get why. He's been better on special teams. He's been one of their top special teams guys. And I think he just offers more versatility at the tight end position, and Turner wasn't reliable. And so, unfortunately, if your good practice play doesn't turn into good gameplay and you commit penalties and you have some drops, that's going to kill your chances of making the roster. And while I do think every single year we wind up putting way too much stock into the final preseason game, because it's mostly guys that aren't going to make rosters playing against guys who mostly aren't going to make rosters. That was kind of the final nail in Cole Turner's roster coffin, if you will.
How much of Colson Yankoff, Javonte Jean-Baptiste being, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn draft picks, do you think factored into the decision on whether or not to, keep or not keep Cole Turner, not keep KJ Henry, just because if there's not a huge gap between the two, why not go with the guy we scouted and did our due diligence?
Well, and also they brought him in for a reason, right? Like the upside's there. Yankoff's a kind of freakish type of athlete, like really, really raw. And so it's like, well, Cole Turner's been here for 2 years. Contractually, like the UDFA is cheaper than the young veteran. And not that they need cap space, but you also have a guy that you feel like you can develop and the upside's higher. Like you've already got a couple of years in Cole Turner's case, and or I guess this was year 2. KJ Henry, you saw some of what he was last year, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste has a higher upside. So why not swing bigger? And so again, it's not so much like a pride thing. It's a on the substance. They brought these guys in for a reason. Tyler Owens, they brought him in for a reason. And when that reason is realized on the field, you tend to stick with those guys. And, they probably wouldn't have drafted these other guys for reasons that became apparent on the field. With Henry, I'm not frankly sure what that reason is. I thought he played really hard. I thought he was productive. He's a great dude, good leadership skills, all that kind of stuff. But for whatever reason, he's not their kind of guy, I guess, or they would rather take the investment on someone who's got a higher upside. Receiver, we went 6 for 6. McLaurin, Brown, Zacchaeus, McCaffrey, Crowder, Pringle. Done and done. We'll see if that holds, though, as they could be in the receiver market on the waiver wire or, as other players get released around the league. At offensive line, Wiley, Cosme, Biotish, Allegretti, Coleman, Lucas, Paul, Dieter. We had Julian Good-Jones. They wind up going a different direction, Anthony, in Trent Scott. So they keep the extra tackle, which I think is pretty fascinating, too, because I would trust Chris Paul at tackle over Trent Scott right now. And if that's the case, why are you keeping Trent Scott? You need a 5th tackle versus another swing interior lineman, a guy who can play both guard spots at the very least. To me, that seems like a spot where they might go find someone. They might go find a guard and ultimately switch out Trent Scott, see if they can move him back to the practice squad and keep him around that way.
Yeah, it was a little surprising also not to see much of Trent Scott in the final.
Well, he was hurt, so
yeah.
And that was one too where we actually had him on the short-term IR.
Oh, that's what it was.
So I guess it's not a total miss from us, but is what it is. So that's the offense. We'll run through the defense. Who made the 53 and how does it compare to what we thought would happen? Defense, there's actually more to talk about. Plus, Anthony, I'm going to end the break. I'm going to try to do a little math. I'm going to see percentage-wise how we did. Not only from the 53 that we projected yesterday, but I'm going to go back to our first 53 and see how many we missed just for kicks and giggles.
Oh, man.
Anthony and I with our first predictions on record of the season and how they went next. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at 6 o'clock, you'll hear some of what Dan Quinn had to say about the roster and what was done today. Right now, we're going through it all, position by position, give you a little analysis, give you some thoughts, and also review how we did in predicting how it all went down. On the D-line, after we've completed the offense here, on the D-line, John Allen, Deron Payne, Cleveland Ferrell, Dorrance Armstrong, Johnny Newton, Dante Fowler, Fedarian Mathis, John Ridgway, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and Jamin Davis. KJ Henry is the big name that gets cut there. Also, for whatever it's worth, Fowler listed as a linebacker. So it presents on the Commanders' official roster as 4 edge guys. So just Dorrance Armstrong, Furl, Jamin Davis listed as an edge, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And then 5 interior guys, Allen, Payne, Newton, who we now know will not go on IR, which is good. We'll see if he's ready for week 1 or it takes week 2, week 3. But Newton, Allen, Payne, and then for now, Fedarian Mathis and John Ridgway, although Ridgway has reportedly been in trade discussions with a couple of teams interested in his services, and the Commanders potentially interested in parting ways with him, or okay with parting ways with him, Anthony, which makes a lot of sense. I don't know that you need 5 interior guys. And I think the Phil versus Ridgway discussion is interesting because they're different. Like, John Ridgway is a big dude by any standard unless you're comparing him to Phil Mathis. Like, Fedarian Mathis is an enormous dude. And I think he gives them a little bit more flexibility. They can play him as a true nose if you wanted to get funky with some fronts. He can play the one tech, so he's lined up between the center and the guard, which is where Deron Payne normally plays. And he's shown a little bit more pass rush juice this camp, and especially the last couple weeks. And I think they've really appreciated how he, along with Emmanuel Forbes, have kind of refocused, rededicated through the second half of camp, and have shown, like, hey, we're high-round picks for a reason. We've got a lot of talent. And while maybe you could argue that they were overdrafted by the previous regime, they're certainly really talented players. And it's just hard to give up on a guy that's that big, that talented, that twitched up for someone his size. And that's why I think Fedarian Mathis is ultimately the guy that definitely sticks around. And then we'll see if Ridgway's here as well.
Yeah, Phil Mathis, the finals preseason game, I want to say that was the first time I've seen him consistently play well, and I think it's consistency out of him that I necessarily want to see. And, he actually, made plays in the backfield, showed up in the box score. Those are things we haven't necessarily seen him do, and primarily because, year 1 he was hurt, and then last year, he was in and out of the lineup as well. So just consistency.
Yeah, that is the tough one with him, is he has been hurt a lot. And how much can you trust him? Why do we think they trust him now? Are they just crossing their fingers and hoping for the best? But we'll see what ultimately happens there. I think it's worth pointing out. I need to double check something real quick. But the Commanders also, placed the following players on reserved injured list. Norrell Pollard was kept on the reserve injured list. He's a guy that flashed at times, and I'm guessing he did not get the designation to return. And so while he certainly could be a long-term project for them, he had a nice spring, but he's probably done for the year. But the other guy is F.A. Obata, who's still floating around. They put him on PUP, so he started camp on PUP. He stays on PUP. That means after 4 weeks, he's eligible to come back. And this happened. Was it last year with Obata? Did he start on PUP last year? Someone did, but I think it was all on the D-line. Or maybe Obata was the guy that got hurt last year that opened it up, but it was like, oh, who's this guy going to play for after 4 games? And sometimes these things sort themselves out. So if one of these guys goes down at either interior or on the exterior, on the edge, within the first couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden you got FA ready to go 4 weeks in. I don't know that he'll actually be ready, but he'll be eligible 4 weeks in. And so that's a nice reserve piece to have. And I think that probably on some level makes KJ Henry more expendable. Henry's a guy that lines up outside but can play that 3 technique, as we saw in the final preseason game. FA's done that a bunch. So you got him in reserve. And then I think, who gets named to the practice squad is pretty fascinating at that position because they've got some, long, rangy athlete types. They've got the Andre Jones Jr., the Jalen Harrises, and then, I would assume that like Benning Patoe, et cetera, winds up back on the practice squad on the inside, and some of those guys have had really, really nice camps. And so if they wind up trading Ridgeway and then you have those guys as depth pieces on the practice squad and you protect them week after week, / other teams aren't jumping to claim your guys week after week. I think you're in good shape there with some of the depth that they have, and then they hopefully will continue to build it in years to come. Anything else on the D-line?
No, I think you touched on everything.
Okay, that's my job. So just making sure that didn't drop anything along the way. Linebacker, we already mentioned Dante Fowler, officially listed as a linebacker, but we know he's an edge. I don't know what's up with that. I guess he can drop back a little bit more in coverage than these other guys, but whatever. We got the 4 right. Wagner, Luvu, Walker, and Dominique Hampton, who's officially been switched, although he can still play some safety and probably will in a pinch if he has to, or they might just drop him out in like a junk coverage. Like, who knows? It's going to be really fun to watch Joey Jr. operate. But I think the big news here is that Jordan McGee goes to IR, designated for return. He can be back 4 weeks in, and then the question becomes, what do you do with that, 4 weeks in? Like, who's the odd man out? Is someone like a Derek Forrest who's made it, if he's just done nothing but not really play, like, do you cut him? Is there another injury? Like, there's always another injury, so I think it's going to be fun to watch what happens there. But Walker's a guy who can back up, I think, Luvu or Wagner, and he'll ultimately be their depth at that position. But they're thin. But in a defense where they're going to use safeties down in the box a ton, I think this is proper roster construction to understand where they need the bodies. And linebacker, Anthony, they just don't need the bodies.
Yeah, and again, I feel as though having all the safeties that we do have, being able to use the 3 safety sets and things of that nature, I think that's really going to help us. And then also we have the guys that offer the linebacker safety versatility, guys that can play in the box, that can be physical.
Chin, Quan, Forrest,
like
on down the list.
I think it makes sense. I'm not going to lie, Craig, it's sort of kind of like how I play in Madden. So I don't use that many linebackers in Madden. I use a lot of safeties, a lot of DBs, because I want the speed. I want playmakers on the field. And not to say you can't have those at linebacker, but I think you just have more versatility there.
I mean, it just depends, though, because if you get a week where a team starts running the ball down your throat, and, sorry to bring that up for Dan Quinn's last game as Cowboys DC, but we all saw what happened against Green Bay last year. So there are teams that have been able to find exploitation of this scheme, but I think the hope is that DQ's a lot more solid up the middle now than he was last year in Dallas with Allen and Payne. So hopefully that is not something that can be done. But having that beef at linebacker would be nice. I think the other thing, though, is Dan has continued to say they'll flex Jamin back to linebacker if they absolutely need to. And so the built-in versatility of some of these guys, I think, does help you be a little thinner at that spot. And then last but not least, safety, Chin, Martin, Reeves, Butler, Owens, and Forrest. They all wind up making it. We had said we thought Tariq Castro Fields would be there. So the corners, I guess I skipped those. Corners, we got right otherwise. It is Forbes. It is BSJ. It is Sainer Still. It is Michael Davis. And it is Noah Igbenogany. So we thought they might go the extra DB at corner. I still think there's a chance there. I still think that's a position to watch on the waiver wire. But Igbenogany can play inside, outside. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see if Sainer still winds up playing 100% of snaps, basically. Like, if there's 2 corners on the field, is he one of them? Or is it BSJ and Forbes on the outside? And then Davis is the logical third guy on the outside in case something happens to one of those 2 starters. But yeah, at safety, they kept them all. And I think the new kickoff rule, the way it is, like having speed to cover kicks is really important. Having big physical hitters is important. And, cutting a guy like Defoe when that's a larger emphasis and cutting a guy with that much experience who played pretty well a couple of years ago when he was healthy, I totally understand. Like, I think they kept the best player of the guys that were in that mix between Chigozie Anusium and Tariq Castro Fields at corner and then Defoe at safety. I know the position is what it is, but I think they kept the best player of those 3 that I think were battling for that spot.
Yeah, I love this group of safeties that we have. I think they all can play, to be honest. So looking forward to how they actually perform out there on the field.
For sure. And we know from DQ's years in Dallas that he definitely will use multiples.
Make the most of them, too.
Jaron Kearse, Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker, like those guys all played together along with a bunch of other dudes for a bunch of top 5 defenses for DQ when he was down in Big D. All right, when we get back, speaking of DQ, you'll hear from the Commanders head coach next. Final hour of the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. Final hour of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Commanders have named their 53. The initial one, of course, by tomorrow, 1 p.m. We'll know more about what they got. We will know more about, what they ultimately will do with the practice squad. So we will get to all of that, the latest version tomorrow. Plus, tomorrow, Anthony, we should have said this throughout the show today. This is a bad hosting job by me. I don't know why I went into like a Minnesota accent for that. The point is, Anthony, that we are closing in on NFL season, which means it's time for the Hoffman Show's annual Fantasy Football League. And how that works is you get to play fantasy football with me and Anthony by calling into the show and telling us why you belong in the league. And we're going to do that tomorrow, and we're going to do it a little bit differently than we've done in the past, which is to say we typically have just done a whole hour of calls at 4 o'clock, and it's been really great, and people have enjoyed it, and that's fine. But we want to mix it up because we know that a lot of people listen at different times. We're on for 3 hours, and to give, especially those of you that are listening, say at this time, this is your normal commute, and you're still working at 4 o'clock or pretending to, at least your boss won't let you go home yet. Then that's not very fair to you. So I got one more person in mind, Anthony, potentially to fill out a quote unquote celebrity spot. So if we have that and we do a 12-team league, that would leave 9 spots. So we could do 3 in the 4 o'clock hour, 3 in the 5 o'clock hour, and 3 in the 6 o'clock hour. And so I think that's the plan for tomorrow. So at 4:30, 5:30, and 6:30 tomorrow, we might have to do the 4-1 at 4:45, but we'll see. Depends on what time Adam Peters gets done with his press conference. We will select who is in the Hoffman Show Fantasy Football League. So the parameters here are not, I've been the 7-time champion of 4 different fantasy. I don't care about your fantasy football accolades. I need to know why you belong in our league. What is your connection to our show? Do you get the show? And if you do, you're in the league. And if not, then I'm going to say, that's great, thank you, and I'm going to go to the next call. So that's tomorrow, 301-230-0980. You want to save that in your phone now. That way you know tomorrow it's 301-230-0980. For right now, though, Dan Quinn. DQ speaking to the press today after naming his 53-man roster. Of course, Adam Peters really the one who names that. And the biggest shock, I think, for everybody was what they did at edge rusher. I think a lot of people expected them to try to keep Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jamin Davis, but not at the expense of KJ Henry, the 5th-round pick from last year who had a good camp and a good preseason. Not just me, Logan, and we talked about how we thought he was on a totally different level than those other guys, and it really secured his spot. And then turns out not so much. So why did they keep Jean-Baptiste and Davis over Henry? Here's DQ.
I think, honestly, when you're going into, new programs, you're really looking at, some things that will change. And, scheme fits and what you're looking for. Sometimes when you're, going into something new, you're looking for different scheme, different fits. But I think, by and large, we've really been pleased with what we've seen from Jamin. And that certainly was part of the factor.
I get it. And maybe they think they can get Henry through the practice squad. And they might be right on that. He was a 5th rounder last year. It's not like he was a 2nd rounder. That said, he was a 5th rounder, not a 7th rounder. And he did play pretty well in the preseason. If I'm the Patriots, I'm going, that dude just smashed my quarterback. I know he was kind of unblocked on that play, but he was disruptive on a couple of others. I'm going, wait, that dude's available? Like, we'll bring him in for some depth along the D-line. There's a couple other places that could use some D-line depth that KJ Henry could be a great fit for them and could wind up on a 53. With that said, he works really hard. He's got a great attitude, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit to see him back here on the practice squad. But they like the project of Jean-Baptiste, and they think he's good enough right now to be, I guess, as effective as Henry. They like the project of Jamin Davis and think that for what role they're going to put him in, that he's a better fit. And that's their job. I don't think, like, at the end of the day, we wind up spending a lot of time and energy on these final roster spots because it's what we have to talk about at this time of year. But these guys are, and they're not inconsequential either. It's not like there's no validity to talking about them, but the guys that are going to win and lose you games are the guys whose roster spots were not in question. So that is probably worth pointing out as well. As for how they go into the decision-making process, weighing draft picks, new guys versus the old regime, especially in a time when there were so many players from the old regime that have been sent out one way or another. How did they go about making those decisions? Here was DQ.
Yeah, I think once I took the job, they're my guys too. And so we're always going to make what we think is the best decision for the team, John. That's our obligation. So no ours or theirs or any of that kind of good stuff. Like, once I was here, man, I connected with lots of players here. And so, yeah, no looking at anything other than just, what do we need to do best for the team? And really that's where it starts and ends.
I really appreciate that answer from DQ, although I will poke one small hole in it that's not remotely DQ's fault. There is just a natural human bias towards our own want to be correct. And so if it comes down to two guys that you like a lot, you're probably going to go with the guy that you selected. And that's just how it is. Every team does it. But the goal is to make sure that that's not a driving force, that it really is a tiebreaker, not a driving force. And I actually believe Dan Quinn, especially Dan Quinn, when he talks about that, it's also not his decision. It's Adam Peters' decision. And I'd be curious how AP addresses that tomorrow. My guess is he goes, I thought Dan said it great yesterday. These are our guys too. But that also doesn't delete the substantive argument of the guys that were here were a part of a 4-win year last year. The guys that were brought in by Peters and Quinn were brought in for substantive reasons. They liked something about them. And so, for instance, Javonte Jean-Baptiste or even Jamin Davis, let's take one of their guys that became our guy because they embarked on a position switch and it became their experiment, right? Our experiment, if you're Dan Quinn. Specifically as the head coach in charge of that experiment. They liked what they saw out of Jameis in that experiment to go, this is worth continuing with. There's something they liked in Javonte Jean-Baptiste that made them draft him. They saw that play out on the field versus, okay, guys that were a part of this 4-win team last year, they might have seen some of the stuff that was a warning flag or a reason why they didn't produce at the level to win more than 4 games. I know there's a lot that went into the stinkiness that was last year, but I think sometimes we get caught up on the narrative side and don't necessarily evaluate it on the substance of why that narrative exists in the first place. Bunch of guys from a 4-win team versus guys brought in for specific reasons, many of which showed on the field, and thus it is a substantive argument, not a theirs versus ours narrative argument. When we get back, a little bit more from Dan Quinn before we talk about one of the hottest stories in the DMV coming up at 6:30. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. There's a story that has taken over the DMV online, and sometimes online stories are silly, but sometimes things that are being discussed in the TikTok and Instagram worlds are worth discussing, and this is one of my favorite topics, and we also need to defend the DMV, so we'll do that coming up at 6. I also saw this story, by the way, Anthony. They were talking about it on the news. So, like, it's off the internet. It is on the airwaves, not just because we're about to put it there. People were talking about it on TV.
It's made its way to Indianapolis as well. Zaire asked me about it.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's reaching, some
it's got
everywhere,
legs,
to be
as
honest.
they say.
Yeah.
It's got legs. It's running. We'll talk about it at 6:30. Commanders, though, named their 53-player roster today. Dan Quinn speaking afterwards and had some interesting things to say, as he tends to do. He's actually a genuinely thoughtful person at the podium, which is great. But one of the interesting decisions that I definitely did not predict, we actually did very well, by the way. We got 49 of 53 players correct on our 53. We actually, Anthony, got 48 of 53 correct from our initial one that we did before I went to France.
Oh, wow.
So, good job by
Okay.
us. Missed, Bryson Tremaine at that point and a couple other guys that were playing well and made sense at the time.
Yeah.
But we also got a kicker to be named later correct. So, what's up on that one? Anyway, one thing that we did not have correct on any of these was them keeping 3 quarterbacks. Why did Dan Quinn ultimately decide that was the right decision for the Commanders, with Jeff Driscoll joining Marcus Mariota and Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, I think as you're going through it, and quite honestly, we like, this quarterback room. And you just want as many guys in the building that are going through the process, understanding the system and working it out. It's such an important position. As you're going through it, you want as many guys in the building that are always developing and always pushing. So no other reason other than just, the talent of the group. And we really felt like these group was really pushing it. And so that was the reason behind it.
I think that what he says first there of we really liked the quarterback room, it actually says a lot. One thing that I would be really protective of if I was this organization is the ecosystem around Jaden Daniels. I'm extremely, now that I feel like I've gotten that pick right, I want to make sure that I got that pick right. Like we did a good job with the scouting process. We got to understand the person. He fits what we do. He's shown that he's got the talent. He's shown that he's got the makeup. So if he doesn't pan out, it's now our fault. It's not his fault. He's proven that he's up to the task. It's our fault. So how do I make sure that he's got the right coaches around him? How do I make sure he's got the right teammates around him? And a lot of focus has, fairly, I guess, been put on the weapons that he has or doesn't have. And, why don't you go get insert veteran expensive receiver X? And I would say that's a bit overrated. Like, I would rather let him grow into that and over time, let's make some investments down the road, see what we can build through the draft, because that is how Adam Peters wants to do this. But having the right guys, the right voices, the right mentors in the room is really important. And that's why Marcus Mariota is so essential to Jaden Daniels' future. And the hope is that he is his backup for certainly this year, if not multiple years, and never actually has to play outside of, hey, it's Marcus Mariota time because the Commanders are up 30 in the fourth quarter. That'd be cool if we got some human victory cigar Marcus Mariota moments in the next couple of years. But realistically, you hope that Jaden is playing and playing through to the final whistle, and things are going great. But having Jeff Driscoll in the room and keeping the dynamic the same with him and Mariota and presumably Hartman, maybe McSorley, I'm down with that because he seems to thrive amongst those guys. Let's let him continue to thrive. And so, yes, having extra insurance, especially in a year where you're entering it with Mariota coming off this groin injury, is also very smart for the football team. But for Daniels' development, having the right guys in the room, important. As for the wide receiver position, a lot of folks, I think, incorrectly thought that either Bryson Tremaine or Martavis Bryant would make the team. I just thought it was too steep of a hill to climb, / they didn't perform quite well enough. Bryant, I would definitely expect to see back on practice squad and see if they can continue to get him up to speed. And maybe eventually, if he's out there torching their corners every single day in practice, do you elevate him and see what he can do? Perhaps. But, scoring a touchdown on a fourth quarter who probably got cut today in New England, they picked on that dude the entire fourth quarter. Congrats, you scored on not an NFL player, with all due respect to that dude whose name I've forgotten. So I'm doing a great job on the all due respect part. But that's not enough to make the team. But what went into to move on from Bryant for now, as well as the other big-bodied receiver in camp who started hot, but ultimately fell off in Bryson Tremaine.
Yeah, Liam, it's two different spaces really. So Martavis getting here later, obviously, that certainly had a factor. I was proud of him for learning a good bit of the system to be ready to play, especially more extended play time versus New England. And with Bryson, he's really putting in the work and has a bigger role on special teams, obviously, to go. And so a number of these guys, Liam, you can imagine, are right on that cusp. And so that's what you're looking to do, is give them feedback about what it'll take to take the next steps. And it's a hard day for a coach or a general manager because, real emotions for guys that are absolutely going for it, that love the game. And so, we want to make sure we spend time with each player. So it takes a long time, but it's really important, and the players deserve it to give them that feedback.
I'd be so curious to know what they told Bryson Tremaine. And in some ways, Cole Turner as well. Like, hey, you guys came out here and, you busted your butts. You really went for it. It's just not good enough. And it might be a production thing for both of them. They had big penalties. Maybe it's a discipline thing. Tremaine, I think back one of the early DQ moments in camp was him going up to Tremaine, talking to him about this is how we line up, setting the new standard. And Bryson, I think, responded fairly well to that throughout the entirety of camp. But maybe there's just an inner fire and urgency that they don't see from him, that it's like, hey, man, if you can prove to us that this is everything to you, maybe that's it. Maybe it's, hey, man, we need you to go work on your speed. I know it's really hard, but we need you to get a little faster. I don't know what it is, but I would love to know what that conversation is with Bryson Tremaine, and to see if they keep him around and let him try to improve on some of that stuff in the building, or do they let him go and he winds up on a practice squad, probably somewhere else, because he is a guy with the big body, smart kid. Obviously went to Stanford, so comes with a certain level of intellect, but plays on special teams as well. Has played some PP, that personal punt protector role, so he could be a useful part of a team on a practice squad that gets called up in a pinch if you need an extra receiver or need a special teams guy, and that could very well include this team. For Bryant, it's more of a what would happen if you gave him more time to learn the playbook and continue to play. And I don't know. He's 32 years old. He hasn't played in an NFL game since 2018, and for a league that's willing to tolerate basically anything, that's telling. And I know that some of that is suspension related, that he hasn't been in the league, but if he was amazing, teams would be fighting for his services. At 32 years old, he's just not what he was in 2014 anymore. That was a long, long time ago. Y'all have been listening to me for a long time in D.C. I didn't live here in 2014. That's how long ago that was, when he was a rookie with the Steelers, catching 8 touchdowns. So I'm just not surprised on Bryant. On the pleasant surprise front, you had Colson Yankoff, tight end, just really played well. One of the UDFAs, Tyler Owens, I think that was, I would have been surprised by the end if he didn't make it. But what does it mean for Dan Quinn to be able to tell those 2 undrafted free agents, hey, congratulations, you've made the 53-man roster?
Yep, I'd say both of them really, have the propensity to absolutely go for it. You feel their intensity. You feel their speed when they play, both on special teams and on offense and defense, respectively. So at the end of it, when you're really trying to establish an identity, David, that you've heard me use that word before, I think those examples come back up. The speed, the physicality, the effort, the straining, those are things that are commander-style play, and I thought those 2 really represented that.
So that's Dan Quinn today, talking about all the different decisions that the Commanders have made. Again, they have a lot more to make. They're possibly even working on trades right now. If you're if you're listening live, well, they haven't made any yet because we would have told you. But if you're listening to this later on the podcast or watching on YouTube or something on demand because you couldn't catch the show live, perhaps you're like, yep, they did sure make a trade. John Ridgway, a name certainly to watch within that realm. And we'll see practice squads, waiver claims, all that kind of stuff gets finalized by 1 o'clock tomorrow. But then there's a whole other kind of trickle down. Like, oh, Team X claims player Y. That means they cut player Z. Well, now the Commanders might go after player Z. So by 1 o'clock tomorrow, we'll have, I would say probably, 50 of the 53 at least should be in place, if not 51, 52. But there's still a chance that some moves get made by, next Wednesday when they rejoin together and get started on week 1, Tampa, the prep, the whole deal as they get together as a team. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, one of the internet's most popular food reviewers came to the DMV. It didn't go great, and we have thoughts. We will share and give you more details if you haven't heard about this next on the Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. If you want to follow us on TikTok, Anthony, I have to look up and see what my TikTok handle is. To be honest, I don't remember it off the top of my head. But it's growing rapidly. Oh dang! I got another 100 followers
Today?
like since the last time we talked about it.
Oh, wow.
I'm at Craig_Hoffman on TikTok because we had a caller who called in and we posted that call on TikTok of him ranting about the Jahan Dotson trade, and it has almost 500,000 views on TikTok. It's got 439,000 views. That's our recent claim to fame. And a lot of people were like, "Wow, this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about the Commanders. We should follow him." So I got a lot of people that are DMV TikTokers that are now like, "Hey, more Commanders content, please." And we're like, "Sure, it's the season. What else do you think we're gonna do?" And the answer is we're gonna talk about TikTok because Keith Lee, who is a very, very famous, I don't think I fully understood. I've known who Keith Lee is for a while. I don't know that I fully understood just how much impact he had, how much crossover appeal he had.
Man.
Very, very famous TikTok food reviewer. His whole deal is that he shows up to places and gets their food basically quietly. He sends his family in, and he's very family oriented. And he's like, "Hey, his tagline is I got it. Let's try it. Let's rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. He's got 16.5 million followers on TikTok, and he was in the DMV. He might still be here, but at the very least, last week was in the DMV, and he went to a number of spots. One in Northern Virginia, a couple in the actual district. He went up to Baltimore. Actually, his favorite spot that he went to was in Baltimore, which caused a lot of ruckus because, well, is Baltimore the DMV? As we've established on this show, Anthony, whenever it's convenient for either the DMV or Baltimore. The DMV loves to claim Angel Reese because she's from Baltimore, but then they love to crap on everything else from Baltimore.
Pretty much.
It's kind of how that works. But he went to Flavor Hive in Northern Virginia, which is actually a cool spot. He went to Okonomi Asian Grill in Fairfax, and then all of a sudden, Okonomi Asian Grill in Fairfax, nobody could go there because they were so overwhelmed. That's kind of what happens. Is he goes somewhere, and his followers are like, "Well, I got to go too," and places go from potentially even on the verge of shutting down to the most popular spots in town. He's literally saved businesses. So the work Keith Lee does is truly tremendous. His mission is fantastic. Because he's made so much money on TikTok, he is now very rich, and he is very, very generous, where he will leave thousands of dollars in tips and also thousands of dollars to be like, "Hey, here's $4,000. The next $4,000 of food is on me." And so, for instance, one of the spots he went to that was very controversial, we'll talk about this in a second, but he went to Hong Kong Carryout in Southeast DC, and then literally went outside in the middle of Southeast and was like, "Everybody go get food." It was literally walking up and down the street being like, "Hey, there's food paid for. Go to Hong Kong, get whatever you want." So the work he does is fantastic. He's very authentic. He's very positive and uplifting. I don't know how he does which recommendations he's going to take. So this kind of blew up because Keith did a video that stated that he went to 12 spots in the DMV. They've posted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, they went to more than that. There's 12 places that he went to that they haven't posted the videos yet. And there's some of them that he's not going to because it, quote, in his words, wouldn't be constructive. That the food was bad. There was one place that he went to where the deep fryer, because I think he's got a shellfish allergy, and he could smell the fish on the fried chicken that he got, and his family went back inside and was like, "Did you fry this in the same oil as the fish?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "That's a huge problem. You can't do that." But he didn't want to out it. Other people definitely did out it. Anthony, should we say where it was?
I don't think we should.
Okay, I don't think we should. Look, it's not that hard. Go in the TikTok comments if you want it. But we'll go on Keith's method and respect his wishes. But people were very easy to identify what that place was. And so then all of a sudden, the DMV is getting this rap as a terrible food city. And this is where we step in, Anthony. This is where we step in. I will let you go first as a DC native, as someone who is more in tune, I think, with a lot of the carry-out spots around town. We can go carry-out versus curry-out as well, as that was discussed in the videos. But as someone who is more attuned, I think, to a lot of the carry-out spots around town, spots that you grew up going to, what do you have to say to Keith Lee and to America?
First of all, Keith Lee, I don't know who you get your Rex from, but the fact you went to Hong Kong on MLK, out of all the carryouts in D.C.,
Carryouts
tells me a lot. First of all, there are multiple Hong Kongs, but you don't go to the one on MLK. And I'm not going to, trash.
Yeah, we're not going
or
to slander any businesses.
Yeah, but
we're not in the
saying,
business of that.
You definitely could have gone to the one on East Capitol, which is probably like 5 to 10 minutes away from the one in MLK. Or you could have gone to my personal favorite, Howard China. There are so many more or so many better carryouts that you could have gone to instead of MLK. So I don't really.
I will say people were very proud of his order, although they immediately
no.
outed the mumbo sauce as the wrong color.
Yeah,
I saw one TikTok that was like, that red mumbo,
Yeah.
everyone knows it's supposed to be burgundy. Who knew the burgundy and gold was actually about mumbo sauce?
Yeah, the mumbo sauce didn't necessarily look too good to me, but he did get it right. 5 wings, fries, some mumbo sauce and everything. You get some salt, you get some pepper, whatever your preference is. I don't really get the salt and pepper, but that's neither here nor there.
Fried hard.
And then also I have a bone to pick with Keith Lee because I feel as though he needs to diversify his palate. To me, it feels as though he only eats soul food and wings, to be honest. That's all he does.
Ooh.
So if you want to complain about, the customer service, first of all, you're going into a carryout. What kind of customer service in D.C. are you really expecting if you're not going to be sitting down in there and you're just walking up to the register?
Well, I think the speed, the friendliness, like there's especially
he said it took 3 minutes.
Well, in Hong Kong, yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
He was in and out in 3 minutes and hot, fresh, whatever. There's another place they went to that it was like 45 minutes. And another place they went to where they were like, it's supposed to open at 1 o'clock. It wasn't until 2:15, like whole deal. So, I mean, yeah, like you can grade customer service, but yeah, on carry out, I think to diversify the palate. That's personally my thing.
There it is right there. Let's go, Craig. Let's get into it, man.
So the problem that I have isn't necessarily even with Keith Lee. It's what's happened to the conversation that it sparked, which is that all of a sudden, like, DC is seen as this crappy food town. And DC is one of the greatest collections of ethnic food in the world. And it is a reflection of our city. DC is a place where you can find people from all over the world because people from all over the world come here to interact with the United States government. And they come here and their families might move here, and then all of a sudden they get they open a restaurant, or it's just an international city in general, so they know there's an appetite. And over the years, all these different enclaves of people, and especially like you have it within DC, but the greater DMV area, now we're talking about truly like if you want any kind of food from Southeast Asia. And I'm not talking just Chinese food. I'm talking about food from any region of China. China's an enormous country. I know, newsflash, there's 1 billion people there. You think they all eat the same thing? No, if you want Western Chinese food, Eastern, Southern, Northern, like you can find regional Chinese cuisine. You can find obviously Japanese, like the ones that you can find on some version everywhere. But how often can you find Laotian? How often can you find all these tinier, Micronesian island type of country? Like, you can find that stuff in Northern Virginia all over the place, and the quality is outrageously high. Some of the best Indian food in America is here in D.C. He went to Dukem, which is great. Long-time family business, love that. But I think a lot of people in D.C. would tell you the place to go is Tischler. And the fact that we have multiple really high-level Ethiopian restaurants is actually the point, not which one you prefer between Dukem and Tischler or many of the others. You want Rasika for Indian. You want, I could go down the list of just incredible food from all over the world. Sababa for, Israeli, Middle Eastern food. Right around the corner from Dukem, there's the Greek spot. If you want more of the carryout, if you want incredible carryout from the Michelin star level chef, go to Yellow. Yellow, which used to be down here in Navy Yard, they have the Georgetown location as well. Like, if you want the best one, truly one of the best pitas you'll ever had, and it's under $20, go to Yellow. Like, there is Stachowski's Deli in Georgetown. Like, yeah, Keith Lee would not be psyched about the customer service there. Getting a sandwich takes forever. That's why they ask you to order ahead online. But if you want a legitimately great, like, delicatessen-style, thick-cut pastrami or turkey or whatever sandwich, they got you at Stachowski's. Again, a little more expensive potentially than $11.95 at Hong Kong carryout. But, like, you have, of course, what DC was known for a long time, which is it's an expense report town. So you have tremendous steakhouses that are ridiculously expensive. You have, Bazaar by Jose Andres and Pineapples and Pearl and like fine dining out the wazoo. There is incredible Bresca and Jaunt, like Michelin starred all over the place. But if you know this city really well on the food scene, you also know where to eat great for $20 or $15 or $10. And I guess that's the thing that I don't want to say, like, I'm mad at Keith Lee. I'm throwing down the gauntlet on a guy who's done such incredible stuff and was, sifting through his recommendations and the whole deal. My like true disappointment where I'm bummed out is now that all of a sudden DC seems to have a reputation as not a very good food town. And that unless you want to spend a ton of money on Michelin starred chefs, and that could not be further from the truth.
Craig, I'm not gonna lie. You just got at him.
I didn't get at him. I very specifically got at it, not at him. I'm like, I would love Keith Lee to come back to the DMV and let me give you 5 places to go.
And I got a couple for him, right now, actually.
Oh, Anthony's got his phone out. He's ready to go.
We got Jerk at Night.
Okay. These are more even within his palette.
Yes. Bus Boys and Poets. That's low-key a staple in D.C.
It is.
Fish in the Hood. Teddy's Roadie. That's uptown. You got Highlands, Brooklyn Grill, Smokies. Like, these are just a few. This is just a few. And you're not going to break the bank. These are, $10, $15 cuisine spots where you can go get high-quality food in the D.C. area. So, Keith Lee, if you're seeing this, if you're hearing this, check those spots out.
And I will bougie it up just a little bit to say, like, yes, DC has a lot of Michelin-starred chefs. A lot of these Michelin-starred chefs have open places that are far more accessible than their Michelin-starred restaurants. Again, like, if you want to spend $100 per person, go to Albi. If you want to spend $15 per person, go to Yellow. If you want to spend $100 a person and have a tasting menu, go to Imperfecto. I believe this is the same restaurant group and the same chef. If you want to spend $15 to $20 and get fantastic Peruvian chicken and sides, go to Chicken and Whiskey. Like, we're talking about Michelin-star, James Beard level chefs that are like, I want my food to be accessible to the people. And they did it in DC. So, again, you're depending on what your definition of carryout is, if it needs to be like, pictures of food on a menu to qualify, then yeah, some of these places are not it. They're a little bit nicer than that, but the quality isn't like, it's not like I'm sending you to a chain fast casual. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but we're talking about some of the best chefs in the world that have decided to make their food accessible, and he's going to places that I don't know why the hell you got the recommendations to go there. Anyway. That's all over the news. Add that to your newsreel, local news stations.
Yeah, but I low-key blame the people that's recommending him to these places, man. Cause
I just wanted to, here's the one thing I'll blame Keith Lee on, because they said they do a bunch of research and whatever. I need an update to the research department.
Please.
That's why. And I also know, in fairness to him, he tries to focus on places that may be struggling because he wants to boost their business and make sure that, he tries to save local businesses. And like Yellow and Chicken and Whiskey and some of the places I mentioned aren't going out of business anytime soon. But they're not going out of business because they're awesome. And so if we're going to highlight the DC food scene, feels like that should be part of the narrative. Okay, now I'm done. When we get back, real things, real people said in real microphones. It's the Hoffman Show, wrapping up here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. All right, Anthony, what was our favorite part of the show today?
Easily the last segment.
I was about to say, we can pretend that it was something that had to do with the 53-player roster, and we've been waiting on that for a long time. But we also know, I feel like today's a weird day. I feel like the next week is a weird week. Because it's like, oh, we're so close. Like, we got the thing. But we know the roster that got named today isn't the one that's going to be the one that opens the season. We spend all this time, like, preparing. And then it's like, oh, my God, can we finally get to game day? Now we have a 53-player roster. Now what do we do between now and Tampa, week 1? But defending our city on the subject of food, a pastime.
Thoroughly enjoyed myself.
I have to say, I just saw, I don't know if I can get it back again. There was a tweet that I just saw. I saw a tweet on Instagram because that's how my life works these days. I don't feel comfortable reading this on the air, but I'm going to send it to you, Anthony. That's what's going to happen. So if you want our impassioned defense of the DC food scene, rewind 20 minutes here on the Odyssey app, or check out the podcast when Anthony puts it up here in the next few minutes. Other than that, housekeeping tomorrow. First spots up for grabs, actually all spots up for grabs in our fantasy league. So be thinking of why you deserve a spot in the league. The simple rule is, like, it's not about your fantasy resume. It's about your connection to the show, and why you think you belong in the league. You have to get the show. You have to demonstrate that you understand this very silly radio program that at times is also serious, but is mostly very silly. We take the work seriously, but not ourselves seriously. And if you can demonstrate that you understand that, then you can be in our league, as long as you're one of the first 3 to call in the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, or 6 o'clock hour when we open things up. So that's that. Also tomorrow, what do we have, Anthony? Oh, we need to talk about the name, not the team name, because we know what the team name is.
We are the Commanders.
For now, but we need to talk about the fact that it's now going to be called Northwest Stadium. So we'll do that tomorrow. Anything else on the docket, Anthony? Adam Peters speaks. I guess that's the big one.
Yeah, outside of Adam Peters. Oh, nope. I guess maybe vibe. We didn't really do a vibe check Tuesday today. Maybe.
We could also save that for Thursday.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see. I think it's going to depend on how extensive Adam Peters is tomorrow.
Okay.
So Adam Peters, make our day. As for right now, let's wrap this thing up.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Oh, this is a good one. I'm very excited to let the people hear this. They recorded an edition of The Shop and asked LeBron James about one of his new teammates, the one that he is the father of, and how that's going to work in the office that is the NBA.
Have you thought through, not relationship, because you always be his dad, he'll always be his son, but what's your working relationship? Is he going to call you dad at practice in the locker room?
No, we already laid that. No, he can't. We already laid that down. He cannot call me dad in the workplace. All right. Once we leave out of the practice facility and the gates close, I could be dad again. Okay. In the car, if we ride together. Okay. At home, I could be dad. No, he got to call me like 2-3 or Brian. Okay. Or, GOAT if he wants to. That's up to him. I mean, it's up to him. But it's easy for me. It's easy for me because I've been calling him Bronny for so long. It's not like I've been calling, hey son. So it's easy for me. It's gonna be the adjustment for him. But we cannot be running down the court. And he'd be like, Dad, push the ball up. Dad, I'm open. Dad, come on. I'm like, no, you cannot do that.
That's really funny, Anthony. We could talk about the more serious underlying things of the nepotism and blah, blah, blah. And we did around draft time, and I think most of it's stupid. But that part of it, that's funny.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do if I'm doing something with my, like, natural instinct is just to be like, Dad, like.
You ever played pickup with your dad?
Nah, I've never done anything athletically with my dad. So me calling him Big Tony would just be weird.
I feel like you just have to call him Tony.
Yeah, but I feel like my stepmom, she calls me Tony.
What does Big Tony call you, though?
He calls me Little Tony. Yeah, it's a little weird, to be honest. I don't know.
Because, like, I'm trying to think how that would work. If you're like, Tony, I'm open. But I feel like he'd have to switch to Ant.
Yeah, or I will have to go to Ant, sadly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You would have to go to Ant. He would have to switch to calling you Ant.
Yeah.
Why is that sadly?
I'm not going to lie, Craig. So I told you when people call me Anthony, it sometimes makes me cringe.
Yeah.
So when I hear Anthony, I feel like I'm in a classroom.
But you could do Ant. Like, just Ant, not Anthony.
Oh, yeah, Ant, it's cool. We can do Ant.
Okay. That's what we've been doing on the show, so I really hope so. If not, we'd have to figure that out tomorrow because we're out of show. So we'll see you tomorrow.